Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
For a decade, Prime Minister Erdogan, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood's Turkish franchise, has bestrode the Republic's politics like a colossus. He has transformed the economy, abolished ludicrous anti-Islamic discrimination. Women in hijabs were hitherto banned from wearing them in public places like schools, universities, town halls and the rest. He has built roads and bridges, bulldozed and battered his way through the stagnation of his predecessors.
His foreign policy began with the intention of no conflict with the neighbors, but that has run into the sands since he allowed Turkey to become the war front in the international assault upon his neighbor Syria. Relations with Iraq are poor too. Last month, a leaked audio file uploaded to YouTube revealed that Erdogan's administration had been discussing with his generals a false flag provocation, which would be used to wage an all-out war on the Syrian Arab Republic. He then promptly banned YouTube.
The Twitter sphere grew thick with revelations about rampant corruption involving members of Erdogan's own family and the sons of other leaders of his ruling AKP. He promptly banned Twitter too. And when thousands earlier took to the streets to protest his increasingly authoritarian rule, he gunned them down with water cannon, rubber bullets, and finally hot lead. Joining us now to discuss the question of Erdogan, victor or villain, is Nesin Fehmi, editor-in-chief of Olay Gazette, the London-based online Turkish newspaper. Thank you very much for joining us. Erdogan has just won 45% of the vote, so not even a simple majority, but he's hailed it as a magnificent victory and vowed revenge on his enemies. It's not quite the magnanimity that one might have expected from an election victor.
Obviously, he calls it a victory, but as far as the Turkish nation and population concerned, I have doubts about that. As far as the municipal elections and possibly the coming general elections, I'm sure he will win again. Obviously, his supporters comes mainly from the religious group, and possibly because of Erdogan's, during his prime ministerial time, he's encouraged a lot of investment, brought free NHS. He's also collecting votes from the other part of the community as well. That's why he's getting his majority. But as far as Turkish democracy is concerned, I have very big doubts that by looking at recent events during Erdogan's prime ministerial time, I can see that they got rid of the security of democracy in Turkey, the army itself. Then obviously they got in control the media, free speech, television, and I believe now they probably have the intention of tampering with the constitution if they get the majority in the coming general elections. So to me, all these events, when I look back, I can see as if this is step by step dismantling the secularism in Turkey.
You say the army is the guarantor of democracy, but the army, of course, frequently crushed democracy in Turkey in the past.
Well,
the military junta ruled Turkey in my lifetime.
Yes, when Atatürk left, he brought in democracy, parliamentary system, changing it from empire, sultan ruling, into a democratic system. Obviously, it was not easy because they just came out of independence war as well. And he thought to himself that there are two institutions that he can trust to protect the democracy that they brought, parliamentary system, the university students, which he made a speech towards the university students for the future, young generation, and the army itself. But obviously there has been corruption in the army as well, which nobody can deny that during that period. And also he formed a national party, CHP. Unfortunately, neither the army nor the political party has served the country as Atatürk would have loved to. If we look at the period between 1923 and Erdogan's AKP party time, CHP has always been in the front line of politics, but they have always used the nationalism card rather than bringing in new policies and development. And they have also damaged the country by splitting the nation into Kurds and Turks, rather than uniting the whole remnants of Ottoman Empire, whatever background, ethnicity they come from. They did not work on it. They worked on nationalism, just Turkish nationalism, which split the country because they have a big population who call themselves Kurdish. Kurds are spread in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, as everybody knows, and they had no nation, they had no country. But this does not mean that they could not have lived peacefully and with equal rights in Turkey, but CHP has never really spent enough time solving these problems and relating to these people with their language. They couldn't speak or learn their own language as well as a secondary language. They did not invest money into eastern and southeastern Turkey. Mostly the investments has always been into big cities like Istanbul, Ankara, Izmir, western Turkey rather than east. So no one can say that they've done any better than Erdogan, the CHP. They used the nationalism card. Now we look at the Erdogan's era, they're using the religious card, because after 600 years of Sultan's rule, which he was the religious leader as well, majority of the population digested Islamic rules and understanding and philosophy. When Atatürk changed into democracy in 1923, they did not have enough time to digest democracy and secularism. Erdogan knew this, and his party knew this, and they tempered with the religious card, and they knew they will get a lot of votes in the Anatolia, the whole Turkey, eastern and southeastern. Plus, on top of that, they added the investment, encouraging investment. And I understand in one of his speeches, he used saying earlier when he was in public eye, democracy is like a train. You jump on it and you jump off as you arrive to your destination. What I believe he meant by that is that we will use democracy as a name. We will use elections as a name to get the votes, get to our destination, and then jump off and bring in the changes that we have in our minds. In other words, Islamic rule, maybe, or
you can't do all that on the basis of 45% of the vote. I mean, as President Morsi found in Egypt,
yes.
Winning 51% of the vote cannot be treated as a mandate for profound transformational changes. The issue for Erdogan, therefore, is if he gets 45%, where's the other 55? And how united are they? How able are they to stop this train?
Yeah, because you mentioned the Kurds.
Yes.
I mean, what's their position now, and how did they vote it in the past election?
At least they have entered parliament. They have their own parties, but somehow they cannot get enough MPs into the parliament due to the election systems in Turkey. So yes, they have a voice to a certain extent, but they cannot enter into a party like the other parties to represent themselves and possibly get involved with politics. And they still that split. And it's not just Kurds themselves. Then you have Alevis, which is a big portion of population. They are not Sunnis. They are Alevis. They don't go to mosque. They have their own places to pray. And none of the governments...
This is the same sect, of course, that the ruling family in Syria.
And they're mostly concentrated in the east as well.
They have their own praying places, but the government seems to be building 200 mosques, as we hear the figures, a year, whereas those people don't have any, they pay tax as well, and they don't have any...
They don't get permission to build?
No. No, the governments are not paying attention and respect.
So what's the opposition then to Erdogan? Is it hopelessly divided and therefore 45%
they are
is
divided.
enough?
They are divided because you got the Kurdish people, they probably will vote for BDP, which is a Kurdish-backed party. Then you have CHP, the national
Atatürkist
absolutely
Republicans. Yeah.
and then you have MHP, which is Milli Hareket Partisi, which is more nationalist party. So they're split. The opposition is split into three.
I see
and
there's
four.
no left in this picture. Is there no Turkish left worth talking about in electoral terms?
No, there is not that much. Well, Ecevit, who used to be the leader of CHP, was supposed to be a bit of socialist, but
Bülent Ecevit, yeah. But
Yes.
what about left of him? Nothing?
nothing. I can't see that, and there is no development in the party itself, and they don't know which card to use, like Erdogan, to attract votes. Nationalism is out of the way at the moment. Only religion is working in Turkey. There are no party who will bring policies where people will say that, yes, we are voting for policies now. What is positive to all these arguments, demonstrations, and changes in Turkey is at least since 1923, almost half of the population now digested secularism. And they are ladies, young women, university students, children going out on the streets and demanding equal rights. So if we look at it, what happened in the last 90 years in Turkish democratic history, at least we got the people now trying to raise their voice through demonstrations like Gezi Park. If you watch the pictures on Gezi Park, you will see a lot of women on the streets. You will see a lot of young students. They are not politically minded. They don't vote. They vote for different parties. But when it comes to local issues, freedom of speech and equality, they're on the streets. So this is positive signs that
Will
at
they be
least,
back on the streets?
I think Gezi Park was the point where public said enough is enough, and they put a stop to it. And this will go on. It will continue. The problem is, where is the party? A lot of people now in the general elections will not even vote because they don't approve any of the parties.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fehmi. We're going to have to discuss that again.
Thank you.
Coming up is one of the United States' hottest up-and-coming investigative journalists who's broken stories to make your hair stand on end, some of which you haven't heard of yet, but you will. Trust me, you will. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sputnik. Who, what, why? That used to be the ABC of journalism, later replaced by the tame acceptance of state press releases and backroom government briefings. Now it is the name of the go-to site, whowhatwhy.com, which tells you everything you need to know and otherwise surely won't be told about America and the world. Its founder and sharpest knife in its formidable box is Russ Baker, who joins us now. Russ, thanks for coming on board the Sputnik. Tell us first, why are you here? Is American journalism seeking to teach us something? How do you get this site? How's it doing? What's it doing?
Well, George, we started Who, What, Why because we found that the full story was not being told to the American people, and we soon started receiving visitors from around the world, particularly from the UK, who also felt that they were not always getting the full story. And so the reason I'm here in London is to sort of try to partner with other people here to recruit writers, financial supporters, others who want to work with us to sort of spread truth-telling journalism throughout the world.
And it's whowhatwhy.com. Let's get that clear.
That's right.
I've been following you for a number of years, and I think there is something of a renaissance in American journalism. I mean, you were just watching the movie.
Well, a while ago we watched All the President's Men, great movie, and it shows the real journalist profession. And then I think, would you say that Who, What, Why is the modern online version?
Well, I always, I hate to step on these sorts of myths, but unfortunately even the All the President's Men story was sort of a myth. And in my book, Family of Secrets, which George knows, I've gone into extensively what the problems are even with that story. The establishment media tends to serve us up stories and convenient heroes who often actually are not. And when you're really going fearlessly, you're looking at the story of Key Bono, who gains in all of these situations. It's much, much harder to find a platform. That is why we exist. That's why we're creating this platform.
But Grenwald and the Snowden affair and your work all seems to indicate that life has not entirely gone out of the investigative American journalist.
That is true. In fact, I would say that there is a hunger for it, and that I think that the establishment media is playing catch-up, struggling to get a little bit of a piece of it. They're afraid to take too much of it, but they want some of it because they know that's where the public is headed.
Now, some years ago, you literally startled me with information I had not seen or heard anywhere else about the character Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker on 9/11. And you revealed things about his time in Florida and so on that were simply amazing and which are not known by the great majority of people even now. But when I met you in Parliament the other day, if anything, you startled me even more with your analysis, which you're working on, of the Boston Marathon bombing. Tell us about that story.
Well, sure, George. What we find is when we dig into these sort of major traumas that result in increased public fear, increased measures by the governmental authorities, really representing kind of a rollback of our civil liberties, we always want to take a close look and see, is the story we're being told an accurate story? Most Americans, and I think most people in the world, feel that it is a done deal that these two brothers committed
Story
this crime.
Actually,
Most of the things that we think we know, we don't actually know. We don't actually know. We've never been shown any kind of evidence that they did it. We think we saw footage of them putting those backpacks down and leaving them there. We never saw that footage. And really, the key element in this whole story that sort of convicts them before any trial is an alleged confession by the elder brother, the Tsarnaev brother, to a man he allegedly carjacked. Now, the problem with that story was when we began to look at it, it falls apart. The man who claims that he received this confession, his identity has been shielded from the public to the present day. And as we look at his story, we see that he told different stories to law enforcement and to different media organizations, suggesting that his story may have been sort of forced along a trajectory from a more benign story in which there was no confession and there was no carjacking to where it was a much grander and more insidious story.
the lead perp, dead. The brother, dead. The witnesses, anonymous. What happened in that apartment, again in Florida, was very different to what the story we were told seemed to indicate.
In a nutshell, the elder of the Tsarnaev brothers dead, the younger brother badly wounded. They fired more than 100 shots into a boat where he was believed to be hiding. He did not have a weapon. He did not fire a single shot back. Second of all, a close friend of the elder brother who perhaps could have shed the most light on what actually happened and what, if any, involvement Tamerlan Tsarnaev may have had in this. He was in FBI custody in Florida, and he was shot and killed while being interrogated. The most extraordinary story.
How is that possible?
How is that even possible? That the FBI couldn't... I mean, they said that he attacked them whilst he was being interrogated. An inherently implausible story to begin with. But even more implausible is the idea that the Federal Bureau of Investigation could not deal with that attack in any other way except by killing the person they were interviewing.
It's all very, very strange. And the other thing you see is that crime scene photos actually show the only substantial blood nowhere near where he was being interrogated, but rather by the door leading from the hallway out of the apartment, from which we conclude the possibility that he actually was shot while trying to escape. And the other thing that's very, very interesting is that that the stories of him attacking have changed, and also very strangely, you know, the FBI is perhaps the only law enforcement agency that does not tape confessions, and they say that he had just confessed before he attacked them, which is so strange. And they say that
he confessed, then he attacked them, then they had to kill him.
Right, and here's even more interesting. The FBI, because they do not tape these things, they always have to have two FBI agents in the room, one of whom does the interrogation, the other of whom records it with paper and pen. But the other agent was out of the room by chance. And so we have essentially no documentation of any of this.
Unbelievable.
This is Keystone Cops stuff. It's extraordinary that an educated, sophisticated public, like the United States public, chooses to believe that story. But of course, they believe it because the alternative is worse. The alternative is that these two guys did not commit this act of mass murder, and that therefore someone else must have. Who might that have been?
Well, a lot of things are possible. It's possible that they were involved in something. We know that the FBI has very reluctantly admitted to knowing this family and interacting with the Tsarnaev family several years before this incident. That's absolutely key. The fact that the establishment media is not focusing on the prior relationship between law enforcement and these people is absolutely staggering, because we know historically that particularly the FBI has a long history of working with informants and even provocateurs inside radical and extreme movements, and separating out their sort of investigative role from their role in tacitly or otherwise encouraging this kind of behavior that then they sweep in and resolve is something that needs to be looked at.
The Snowden revelations and the reverberations over here, where it was revealed, but only if you read The Guardian, not if you read anything or watched anything else. The heavy lifting being done by the British security services in conjunction with the NSA in the United States all seem to point to a security state which is out of democratic control, not subject to public scrutiny because the media is merely an echo chamber of what that security state is telling them. That's a very dangerous set of coordinates, don't you think?
It's tremendously dangerous, and I think it's becoming more dangerous by the year and even by the month. We see new measures being incorporated all the time. And one of the things that troubles me is the lack of accountability. In the United States, we have minimal accountability. Here in the UK, you have almost none at all. People like yourself and other people in Parliament have told me that they really have very little ability to ask questions and find out what really is going on. And that is dangerous, and that is, I think, inappropriate in a democracy.
WhoWhatWhy.com. More power to your elbow. Ross Baker, thanks for joining us. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think in the social media roundup. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, I asked Erdogan, victor or a villain? To which Claire Robb responds, when you start trying to censor the internet, then you're on the way out, and he will be gone soon. Sarp Ulas adds to that, saying that it's odd that the voting fraud, which may have changed results in 3 cities, isn't making any headway on international media.
Well, there was an allegation of voting fraud. I don't myself think it has all that much traction, and neither, I should say, did our guest, the editor of a very well-respected online newspaper. So there may have been, there always is in every election, some voting fraud. But I don't think there's any serious reason to doubt that Erdogan has 45% of the polity in Turkey, which is a very impressive number, but it's not the magic number, even of 51%. And as President Morsi found out, even 51% isn't enough.
Well, most are associating him more to the villain. Guillemette says that he's even a terrorist by association, and I think we understand what he means with that.
Well, David Cameron has just announced an investigation in Britain into the Muslim Brotherhood and their potential for terrorism, which is actually absurd. It's absurd to call Erdogan a terrorist, but if David Cameron's saying the Muslim Brotherhood may be terrorists, then ipso facto, Erdogan may be a terrorist because he is no more and no less than the leader of the Turkish chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood.
You think that association, I was thinking about the association with supporting the terrorists in Syria.
Oh, that's no doubt. But then by that definition, David Cameron is a terrorist. William Hague is a terrorist.
Yeah, they're all. Shet Mohtasim says that he's actually a victor turned into a villain. And that, I think, is a more appropriate description.
That's kind of my analysis. I was
We all
an admirer of
supported him.
Erdogan.
Yeah.
He's tripled the size of the economy in 10 years. He has liberated Muslim women from totally oppressive and unjustifiable imposed secularism.
Secular laws, yeah.
I thought he was doing terrifically well until
He turned into a villain.
The Syrian imbroglio. When I saw his comments after his victory, I thought they were very, very unwise. Even a juvenile politician here knows that when you win an election, you really have to be magnanimous to those you've just defeated.
Humble, right? Yeah.
But to come to the microphone and threaten all sorts of dreadful consequences for those who had the temerity to oppose you, it's very bad politics.
Well, that's all we have for this week.
Which sadly means that's the end of the show.
Remember, you can reach us on Twitter at RT_Sputnik, and on Facebook, you can like us on Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvelous.